Hello, Veronica. It's Mr. Shawn again, here to read another story. Hope you're getting these stories and are enjoying them. If you are, I'm enjoying reading them to you. I hope things are going well for you and your family. So today's story is Don't Pick Brian by Anne Harth. And all these guys, are they playing baseball, it looks like? Could be. Let's see what the story is here. Don't pick Brian. He's afraid of the ball. Brian heard the whispers. His face felt warm. He shuffled his feet. Yeah, people do that when you're picking sides and you're not a good player, better as good as others. They do that. That's not a great thing. That's happened to me and it doesn't feel good. So let's see what happens with Brian. Janie Peter pointed. Janie skipped over to stand with Peter's team. Theo, Amy said, you're with us. Theo stood by Amy. So have you ever been part of being picked for a team when you're out playing? Happens a lot. The group of kids waiting grew smaller. Soon Brian stood alone. Brian, you're on Amy's team, Mr. Rich said. Yeah, it's always kind of not fun being the last one picked. Been there many times myself, but you can always prove yourself when you're out there playing. So always do your best no matter what you're picked. If you're picked first or last or in the middle, you always do your best. Okay, listen up. We're doing something different today. Brian sighed. What now? Brian, I think, is nervous. Today we will run relay races. Brian heard some groans. Running? It had to be better than softball. Line up, teams, Mr. Rich said. Amy stood at the front of their line. Everyone wanted to be first. Brian was last. I think this is Brian here. He looks a little bit concerned. Mr. Rich pointed to the other side of the field. You see that orange cone out there? Oh, looks like there's two orange cones, not just one. Everyone looked. Everyone nodded. When I blow this whistle, what? What happens when he blows the whistle? You can start. Do they do that when you run races? Do they blow a whistle to start sometimes? See, here's the whistle around his neck. The first person runs around the cone and back here. Tag the next person in line. Then that person will go. The team that finishes first wins. Mr. Rich lifted his weight. All right. Let's see what happens here. Got that? Everyone nodded. Ready? Mr. Rich raised the whistle to his lips. Brian stood on one foot and then the other. He seems a little nervous, I think, anticipating what's going to happen. So let's see what happens during the race. Frit! Amy and Peter took off. Go, Amy, run, Peter. Peter was faster. He raced around the cone and headed back. Amy wasn't far behind. They pounded back to the start. Peter tagged the next person. Amy tagged her. The next two raced away. So have you ever been part of a relay race where you have to run and then come back and tag the next person who takes off and you keep doing that? It doesn't always work out the way you think. Someone that you think is slow is fast. So, like I said, always do your best no matter what. Brian felt his heart beat faster. There were only 5 people in front of him. Could he do this? Would he lose it for his team? Brian would run against Janie. Janie was fast. The kids shouted and yelled. Brian was quiet. Even though you think somebody's faster, you could be faster. I remember I was watching something where it was a swim meet and it was a relay race. And one person who was thought to be slower than the person was actually turned out to be faster. The faster person went out in front, and the person who was supposed to be slower actually caught him and won the race. So never give up. There were only two people to go. Theo was in front of Brian. He was ready. Theo took off. He raced around the cone and headed back. Peter's team was still ahead. Uh-oh. That's not good. Let's see how fast Brian's going to be. Brian's stomach hurt, but he was ready. Theo pounded toward him. Brian held out his hand. Theo slapped it. Go, he shouted. So, Brian ready? Let's see what happens. Brian went. Janie was ahead. Her braids flew behind her. Brian dug his feet into the ground. He ran as fast as he could. He looked up. Janie seemed to be closer. Oh, was he gaining on her? Again, Brian is doing his best, running as fast as he can. Brian ran harder. He raced around the cone. Janie was so close, he could almost touch her. He ran even faster. And that happens when you see someone ahead of you, you want to try even harder. Come on, Brian, his team yelled. They cheered, they clapped. You can do it, Brian. Brian pushed harder. He passed Janie and crossed the finish line. Woo! Brian got encouragement from his team too, and that helps when you hear that. Amy's team wins. Mr. Rich lifted his weight. Now, he said, let's mix up the teams. The kids stood together in a group. Theo and Janie are the new captains. Oh, let's see how where Brian gets picked this time. I think I know. Brian stood in the middle of the group. He heard the whispers. Pick Brian. He's the best runner. Brian grinned. Yep. See, when you that can happen. Things can turn around. Again, you got to do your best at whatever you do. Even if you're not as good as someone in something, you're certainly as good or better than someone else in another thing. So it's always best to encourage everyone. All right, so let's see what the questions are for this story. What lesson do other students learn because of Brian? Well, what did we just talk about? And then the theme of the passage is how did Brian feel when he heard the whispers? So, remember the story as we were talking? What did the other students learn because of Brian? Well, I think part of it is don't always judge based on what you think you know. And you want to encourage everyone all the time. What is the theme? The theme of the passage is what? What have we been talking about? Pretty much do your best all the time. And how did Brian feel when he heard the whispers? Well, which whispers were they? The first whispers, he felt pretty bad, didn't he? But then the second set of whispers, he felt good because he proved himself. But again, it always doesn't always um, happen that way. So you just have to be brave and be strong and do the best you can. And know that you've done the best you can. That's the most important thing. All right, Veronica, that's our story for today. We'll I look forward to reading another story. Take care. Bye bye.